Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This Week in Challengers. And boy, do we have stuff to talk about this week. The Elite Four wrapped up last night with the Telluride Bush taking it all. But we got to also talk about some of the superstar performers also in that bracket. EMEA had some fun things to talk about, and a nice little maybe fun topic regarding maybe some earnings that are happening across some Challengers teams versus their CDL counterparts. A lot of good stuff to cover this week, so let's go ahead. Let's dive on into it. Of course, like we just mentioned, Elite Four wrapped up last night with a bang. Before we talk about the Telluride Bush and their rise to fame, we want to take a second to talk about their opposition that was also in the bracket, because there's also some other teams I think that really kind of came out and surprised us. Last episode, Seymour and I kind of worked through some of the initial rounds that were here, but just seeing how the rest of the bracket played out, my man, it was really fun to just see some of these different teams kind of either A, continue their path, or B, show some signs of life. I'm looking at rosters like, obviously, let's start it with that Cabal roster, right? They started last week looking absolutely lights out. Sure, it was a Game 5 against Falcons Academy, then it was a 3-1 against them at Brooklyn, and you're like, all right, you're feeling pretty good. How are you going to fare against a team like the Telluride Bush or some of these kind of upper echelon rosters? They fared pretty well, my friend. It's a back-to-back Game 5s against not only the Bush, but also the Huntsman. But still, the fact that this roster of what we have here is just like, it's so fun to see maybe a newcomer so late in the season kind of find their footing and now be a force in North America.
Yeah, I didn't have this team even making out of groups, I don't think. Or at least so. Maybe if they did, they would scrape by. Like Flames, Dimensions, Rispy, Vic. This feels like a random coming together of four, almost like piecing together leftover parts. And Vic as well, the last look that we really got at him in the Elite, it wasn't pretty. So the growth that these four players have suddenly been on, and sometimes we get that, right? Like teams kind of come together, they're the underdogs, they're scrapping to prove that they deserve to belong, and in that they form a brotherhood that gets them through. But also just kind of flexing a little bit of talent that they do all have and why we've talked about them in the past. So yeah, really glad to see it. But also, I mean, it's one of them to sit there and be like, yeah, you made the finals, unlucky, you lost to Bush, but you made it, so like, yeah, you've done a great job. It's just also that run, like Falcons Academy, Ole Miss, Brooklyn, Bush, Huntsman, Bush. I don't know if we could have put a tougher run up there for them, and yet the fact that they get through most of those hurdles is insane on the face of it. So yeah, great stuff out of them. A roster that most certainly surprised, and at a great time of the year as well to be doing that.
Yeah, it feels like this is also like, when you kind of think about it, it does make sense why they're maybe finding some footing, because on one side you have the veteran in Flames, right, who's been around Challengers in the league, that's kind of been bouncing back and forth, right? A lot of experience there. You then have this sort of dynamic duo of Dimensions and Rispy, right, who've been here basically since the beginning of Challengers, only for a brief moment were they not playing together, right? So here they are back together playing, and then you kind of have this young gun, Vic, who's now coming on in. I mean, we even heard when Bush were kind of dealing with the whole Abe situation, like Vic was going to be the guy they were going to go snag. So obviously there's a reason for that. And seeing Vic be able to now on this team still manage to fry out, really, really good. Also on that same note, it was great to also maybe see Cabal get a little bit of revenge against the Huntsman for Dimensions and Rispy as well. It was a Game 5, came down to the wire there. But speaking of the Huntsman, man, a little bit of a disappointing bracket, I feel like, for that organization. They were coming into this one, I think, feeling really, really good. They do only lose to, they go to a Game 5 against the Stush. They go 3-0 against the Bush. That's a mouthful that's there. They 3-0 Falcons Academy. They 3-1 Bittersweet, and you're starting to be like, all right, this is the Huntsman of old. They have to be making this huge run through that loser's bracket. But it's just going up against Cabal. I don't know what it is. Cabal has their number. They fall short there in that loser's finals. That's there. I think we probably would have had Huntsman a little bit higher overall in this bracket. That's there. Not expecting them to have to kind of make this loser bracket run and then kind of dying out in losers finals.
There's something about this team now. I don't know if this is going to be a hot take and get me flamed somewhere, or if people are actually
going to roll. Why not?
Because I get the opinion that Huntsman fans are uniquely tuned in to the performance of their squad. You got people like Formal and Scump tuning in, giving analytical takes and stuff. I get the weird feeling from this roster. There's a lot of players playing for themselves in the sense of they're looking to make a statement on the team that has a lot of eyes on them, other than the Bush. Obviously, Huntsman going to have a lot of that optic backing behind them. And I think you've got the situation where all of them are trying to like kind of make the stats look good and the hero plays and all that kind of jazz happen, because that would put them in great stead for maybe making a statement to get into the league. You would have that spotlight and you'd be taking advantage of it. I looked at some of the plays that came through. There was a moment, I wasn't here for last week's episode, but I wanted to kind of talk on it there. There was a moment early on in the Elite where Johnny himself like kind of made this weird play in Overload where he very much so was like trying to kill farm. And I also, you know, Brack and Awakening have come under criticism for that kind of stuff before, and I wouldn't put it past it kind of happening again. And it doesn't feel like a team unit. They're going to get deep into tournaments because there's a lot of talent on the roster, but they look more like 4 individual players. Like if you'd have said to me that Cabal played like Huntsman did and Huntsman played like Cabal did, I'd have gone like, yeah, all right, because Huntsman have had a couple of minutes together and Cabal haven't. Whereas, yeah, I don't know, man. Like I get the feeling whenever you play and you kind of watch the plays that they're making happen, I'm like, all right, that looks good, but the impact isn't there. And that's the level that Huntsmen are going to need to find as we go towards the business end of the season.
Yeah, I think these are basically some of the teams that we have to keep our eye on as we get a little bit deeper into the season because, yes, we know who the heavy hitters are, but it's these types of teams that either could continue to fizzle out or could continue to find success in some of these highlight, matches because you don't have a lot of opportunity left to maybe kind of make yourself shine here in this Challenger season. So seeing the sort of snapshot of Elite Four, we'll have to keep our eyes on these teams, especially when we start talking about the Paris Open. Of course, though, we got to talk about the big dogs here, the winners of Elite Season 4. It is none other than your Telluride Bush continuing to have form here, Enigma. We were kind of curious about how this roster would perform coming into Elite Season 4, just with everything that went around with roster mania. Are you losing Abe? What's going on? What's happening here? And well, for the Bush, they continue to push on forward, right? They get Traix on into the mix. Very early success with Traix that was here, and they come into the Elite, and they are nuclear, okay? This feels like we're kind of getting back to that Bush form of where they just kind of look a little bit a cut above a lot of these teams. And one of the things I really loved in this grand finals that we saw, there were so many, and even in the game 5 before against Cabal, there were so many maps where they were down, right? They were from behind. It looked like maybe their opposition was going to be able to run away with it. And what do? They just surge from behind and get themselves right back on into the game to get those map wins. And that's something you and I have talked about a lot with this team is like when they had those maps where they looked absolutely dominant, it was like, okay, cool, this is great. But when they were behind, you could start to see maybe some cracks in the armor, and all of a sudden they weren't necessarily the team that we've gone ahead and seen. Feels like they fixed that problem now. The mental fortitude is maybe there, and even when they're down in some of these maps, they're saying, hey, it doesn't matter. We can go ahead and we can come back on into this. And that's the type of mentality you have to have if you want to try and win some of these elites.
I think one of the beautiful examples of exactly that is, I remember the start of the year, because Yumi got to cast stage 1. Yeah. And we talked about not only the overload record, but the round 11 record. It was terrible. Like they had this weird kind of thing about no ice, no clutch. You were right about they were dominant, and quite often, thankfully, especially in hard points, they were. But it was a case of, okay, but if you're going to win championships, you have to have that ability to see out tough situations, overcome hurdles. As you talk about some of the comebacks, that's a great way of showing that. But also, they actually win the Elite on around 11. So it's just stuff like that. Seeing moments like that where he goes, okay, this team's the full package. And quite early so as well, considering Traix has just come into things. So, yeah, this is great to see for Bush. There was weirdly a bit of criticism on the timeline about how they're just using ex-pros to farm challengers. I'm kind of like, yeah, but if they're doing it consistently,
so like 4 other teams also though.
But it's like if you're doing it consistently, doesn't that show that Bush are actually great at building teams? Like I don't really see where the criticism was coming from. But yeah, Bush are doing a wonderful job, and obviously Pro Loot now he's kind of trying to make a statement of getting back in the league, and there's a couple of names that sitting right there that have obviously been in and out of the league. I think for Cap, you've just had your opportunity. I'd be surprised if Traix doesn't get another chance, to be honest, especially with the performance he put on.
No, I think that's cool. I mean, it's like you saw him with that stint on the Miami Heretics, and obviously it was really cool to see the whole Spanish, full roster that was there. But with him now finding success here in Challengers with, Cap, Proloot, and Cammy, now maybe some of these other teams can say, well, okay, Traix was able to come down in here. He's looking fantastic in Challengers on an all-English-speaking team. All right, that's cool. If you don't know, Traix is Argentinian. So, kind of obviously Spanish is...
So it's Spanish? Yeah, but it's not Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Is the key thing there. But more importantly, though, he can still, have some success on these English rosters. And so I'm right there with you, man. I think if we're going into next year, there's going to be some people who are saying, hey, we need more firepower. And especially, you know, I don't want to get too much into it, but with Modern Warfare 4 looking to be a maybe slightly slower game, you need those slayers on your team who can absolutely rip, right? And Traix might be one of those people that could be high on the list when you're kind of looking, trying to form a team based around how the game plays, all that fun stuff. It's going to be really, really fun. Speaking of Traix, let's talk about some of his stats, dude, because MVP, of course, of the event. You love being able to see it. I'm going to pull it up in a way better format here, but absolutely crazy stat line. You brought up one that I want you to go over especially, which is like, even in that last S&D map, terrible stat line from Traix, still ends with a 1.33 overall.
Yeah, so in the last map alone, at one point he was 3 and 10. And I think he gets the last 1 or 2 kills. So he goes 4 and 10 or 5 and 10, whatever. And like, but it just goes to show how dominant he was through the elite, that he's still walking away with a 1.33. Like, that is gross. Yeah. Truly taking a level. And no doubt helping you see out a lot of those tight situations that we're talking about. Your round 11s, your map 5s, those ones where all of a sudden there is a lot of pressure. It's not just a case of going out and playing the game. You understand this is your final life. So yeah, great stuff from him. But also you just overall performance in the hard points, 1.07. Overload, 0.98. Overload, they tend to play him in more of this role of like baiting stuff out and being on the front lines and being the tip of the spear. So I mean, when I think about like Abizi over the years, right? Sometimes people would mention KD, but you'd always then mention, but he's the guy on the front so that Simp and Selim could do their kind of thing. Obviously, I'm not trying to compare these guys to those three, but like Traix is being that man. So he's very much putting his life on the line to try and drive that device forward. So yeah, lovely stuff out of him. I think that the only thing for him is like, again, you know, seeing whether or not other teams in the league now are going to go, well, he's had success on an English roster. Do they believe that this is enough to give him a chance elsewhere? Because clearly, as far as Miami Heretics were concerned, unfortunately, the Spanish wasn't Spaniard enough. So I'm hoping that this is still a statement of like, okay, some of those teams towards the bottom of the CDL, you could do with a man like Traix leading your line.
You definitely could. And I think just kind of shortening the view into the rest of the Challenger season, right? Traix finding form here in your first elite, getting dropped on down. It's a brand new team, and you're still managing to be a very key player on a very, you know, kind of a high optic roster that's there. I think a lot of people maybe might not have answered the call, and for Traix to be able to come on down and have this type of performance should bode well for the rest of the year, right? Because you basically have the Paris Open, which I'm now 99% certain they were able to get a team pass for. So they have one there. They will be at Paris in the Major Open. Pretty good shot in the running to be at Challengers Champs right now, if not through that Open, through pro points on that side. And hopefully, you know, obviously the kind of end goal for this team would be to make it to the Esports World Cup, right? And so when you kind of look at these high major tournaments, that's kind of really all you have left in the year. You want somebody with this type of experience like Traix in your lineup, right? Who has played on the lead, he's played in the brightest lights on the biggest stages. So when you're talking challengers, there's going to be some people who might find that daunting. He's going to be saying, no, I'm right there. I'm up for the challenge. And I want to be that key player on the bush that helps us get those victories. Now, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about this tweet that T-Bush Update put out, because this is kind of an insane stat line. However, nuance is always the enemy of Call of Duty viewers and enjoyers. But I thought, you know, it would be cool for us to kind of talk about this and help break it down.
Hot takes.
Let's just talk about this and break it down. So the original tweet was saying, with that win, Telluride Bush have eclipsed 100,000 earned on the year in prize pool. Okay, I'll be very clear here. I think the in prize pool is the important part of any of this conversation that's being missed, but still just comparatively, I think this is insane because it kind of brings up a really good topic, Enigma. So they kind of follow that up with saying, with $103,000 earned, Telluride Bush have also earned more than 8 out of 12 teams in the Call of Duty League this season. Toronto's earned 100K, Minnesota 52.5, Falcons 30, Miami 30, Surge 7.5, Ravens, Boston, and Cloud9, straight up goose eggs that are there. And I think a lot of people, I kind of retweeted this saying, there's so many people saying, get Telluride Bush into the league, get Bush into the league. And I'm like, listen, I understand that that's sick, right? Obviously, you want to be part of the pinnacle, the creme de la creme. You want to be up there. But also at the same time, you have to look at it and say, well, if they are the most successful challengers org, I think this year by winnings, you know, when you're looking at it from that aspect, and they're earning more than 8 out of 12 teams on a lower run rate, why do the Bush need to kind of have this focus on the league, right? But we kind of just talked about it. You brought it up in our talk about Elite Season 4. They found a system of taking these experienced players and being able to help mold them and shape them into a way to have these winning rosters. So like, if you're going to come out in here and dominate challengers, why do we even have to kind of talk about the league? Because here's the reality. Take that Telluride Bush roster, put them against the caliber of players in the league. Do they have the same level of success? Do they all of a sudden now start kind of usurping the throne of any of these teams? I guess that's maybe the question, man, because now that I kind of say that out loud, do I think that Bush roster is better than Cloud9, Boston, or Ravens? Hell yeah. I think that's probably true. Are they better than Surge? I think most of the time, maybe. Are they better than Miami?
Current iteration of Toronto, maybe.
maybe the current iteration of Toronto.
I don't know. Like, look, we could sit and try and compare roster to roster, but I don't think that's the conversation necessarily. Yeah. I think it's a case of the pros and the cons for Bush about whether or not they want to get into the league is like, and reminder, some of the elites, they were ass, right? Like we had that, was it stage 2 where they kind of completely floundered? I forget which one it was.
Yeah.
But like, so they're missing a lot of potential prize money they could have taken. They had cups where they were poor and so on. I think for Bush, the thing is, if they got into the CDL, obviously they would receive, I think anyway, a hell of a lot of sponsorship, right?
Yes.
Because of who they are and what they do, and that would help them run at that higher
more
run
eyes,
rate.
More optics.
I think where Bush are uniquely positioned in the space and why Challenger is such a wonderful thing for them is they're basically fighting for the poor man. Like, that's what they're doing right now. Like, they are making it known and being very loud for challengers. And like, even moments like the Team Pass situation recently, I love the folks behind the CDL and all that, but they got that one wrong. And like, the thing is, in past years, it probably wouldn't have been a case of like, well, we're just going to have to fix it in the future. And all the noise that Bush made undoubtedly applied enough pressure for us to fix that, to remedy that situation. So I think that what they're actually doing a wonderful job of now, and if we were to try and pro and con and balance it all out, it all becomes a bit convoluted. I think undoubtedly right now, Bush have become the figurehead of challengers just because they're willing to stand up and say, this needs to be done in this way to be fair. And I think that that's getting them a hell of a lot of love across the entire COD ecosystem, even in the league.
No, I completely agree with you. And the other thing that I think is a facet of this as well is like, we've seen time and time again, players who have either left the Bush or just left challengers in general to go up to the league. And now when you're kind of maybe looking at this as a player, right, yet again, this is prize pool earned, not only salary of whatever the Bush contract is that's there. So if you're a player and you're looking at this and you're saying, wait, the Bush are in challengers, they've earned over $100,000 total in prize pool. I don't know what the contracts are. I don't know what the split is. But even if it's a solid, that's still a solid amount to have earnings as a player over the last, 6-7 months, that's there. Especially if you're somebody like ProLoot, who's been on that team since the beginning, right? Like, which is probably why when I'm looking at they're like ProLoot to the league, I'm like, does ProLoot want to go to the league at this point? Because if you're talking about making money as a Call of Duty player, okay, unless you're making it to a team that's offering you a solid, substantial salary, you're probably going to be making more staying on the Bush. You're getting more eyes on you. You have an opportunity to make a better lifestyle as a professional Call of Duty player when you are this top caliber talent. So now that kind of, to me, is something I keep in the back of my mind. And maybe when we kind of look forward to next year and stuff, when we talk about roster mania with some of these players, is like, is it worth it to leave the Bush to go to the league at this point? If you are a player who is helping the Bush win, is it even worth it at this point?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a tough one. I think, for the players right now, like, I think you end up in a situation where it's like, look, this works. We probably expect to get to EWC on current form. Again, we'll come to the qualification and all that stuff in next week's episode, but it's a case for them of like, I don't know, if I was looking up and I'm thinking, all right, well, Cloud9 have made me an offer to play for 3 bags of crisps. It's like, well, what I could do is go there and definitely get absolutely body slammed in EWC. Or I can give it a go with this roster and try and make that underdog hero run with a team that I know is capable of doing something. I even just think like going into the tournament and just the experience of it, the vibes are definitely going to be better on this side right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And also, just for the record, no shade to anybody who has made that jump, right? Of course, from like, let's say the Bush back into the league at all. You got to take your chances, because I think sometimes you don't really think about it until you see stuff like this, which is why we want to talk about it, because I didn't think about any of this. Obviously you're like, yeah, Bush is really successful, but to like see it comparatively, I think is like the eye opener that you need sometimes, right? So I think a fun thing for us to talk about. Let us know in the comments. What do you think about that whole kind of situation? Do you want to see Bush in the league? Are you happy with them staying in challengers? Do you think for a Call of Duty player, what should they do in their career if you have an opportunity like this ahead of you? Now, however, North America wasn't the only region that was having some fun, of course, in the Elite. We're going to take a quick look at the bracket for EMEA that was here, because there's definitely some storylines that we have to keep our eye on, because this is going to come down to the wire when it comes to pro points and qualifications to Challengers Champs and maybe even EWC. And also, let's remind folks, ahead of the Paris Major Open, because that's going to usually be a little bit more EMEA skewed, like we saw with Birmingham at the start of the year, right, Andy? So let's kind of kick it off with, obviously, Omit come out swinging. They are able to take that win. But let's talk about some teams other than Omit before we get there, right? I want to kickstart, I think, with Rock Esports is the one that I would like to turn our attention to, because we see them, they make that roster change coming into Elite Season 4, drops them out of that top spot on Pro Point side, and now they kind of continue to struggle. You win a Game 5, Round 1 against a team that maybe doesn't have a lot of stature to them, and then you lose a 3-0 against P7, you drop down, you win another Game 5 against a kind of team that you maybe should just be stomping, and then just get 3-0'd by the French and Exceptional Gaming. Not the performance that we've come to expect from Rock.
No, definitely not. And most of the EMEA year has been that there is almost a tier at the top, which was Rock, Project 7, and kind of Omit have flirted with that a little bit. We all thought that Exceptional Gaming were going to be a part of it, but no. And but now it feels like they've dropped almost down into that same category as Exceptional Gaming, which is like talented team. They're probably going to be top 4, but we're not expecting them to harm the top 2 in any way. So don't get me wrong, I respect the change. Like, things had obviously not gone right for a while. Rixold was a very glue type player, which is great. If you're putting up a 0.9 and you're winning, then you're doing your job, in my opinion. Whereas he was having some maps that were really ugly and the team were not winning anymore. So I respect the change. You bring in Clocks, you give him a go. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know where this team really go from here. It feels like, and this happens every season. You get a team at the start of the year who just on raw talent, and in this case, an unusual play style, they just hunt like a wolf pack. They managed to get themselves through the season and into some decent positions and even win things. They were great, of course, Major 1, say Open 1 and Open 2. But it's a case of you then get to a point in the game where people figure out how to play the game astutely enough so that when they come up against you, they know how to counter what it is that you're good at. And for me, Rock have not really shown development since that patch of the season, which I hate to say. I'd love to see that meta representation at EWC if possible, but I don't know. Right now, they seem a mile off. And the coaches in the back, Vortex, Lewis, JB, you got to figure out a couple of things, I think.
Yeah, it feels like kind of you had two things happen at the same time. I think you're right on there. It was like everybody else figured out how to play the game, also just at the same time that the NPC meta came on in, right? And I think that's just kind of two things that are very difficult to deal with at the same time, right? Where you're saying, okay, the opposition's now way better, and now we have to completely rethink how we play the game. And I wonder if that meta change kind of helped level set basically a lot of the different teams there and kind of took away some of the lead that Rock had on the opposition, rather. Another team I think we got to talk about is Exceptional Gaming that we just talked about, kind of mentioned. They've been sort of lackluster since the beginning of the year. We've had high hopes for them. This is a team that should be doing well. The French roster of Brezi, Cobra, Linz, and Mighty that has now come on in. They lose round number 1 in a Game 5 against P7, which I think does show some signs of life, because I think if you had asked me coming into this, I would have said, it's going to be a 3-0, right? That's there. But hey, it's a Game 5. Okay, cool. And then they go into a 3-0, another Game 5, and going up against Rock, and the 3-0 against them is very, very solid. Obviously, they run out a little bit of gas going against the champs in Omit. They get 3-0 there, but that I'm less surprised with. But for this Exceptional Gaming roster, ahead of that Paris Major Open, right, where you know that they're going to be, you like to see some signs of life from this team.
Yeah, most certainly do. Like, this is... I don't know, like, I've been critical of them this year, right? I have said some things that I don't know how many rosters I would say that about, but they were so disappointing so early. Like, this is a roster stacked with talent that has been right up there all the way through EMEA Challengers since it's been a thing. Obviously, some of you have been in the league. Some of you probably should have been in the league at points and weren't given the opportunity because of visa situations. There's a lot of talent there, and they were awful, especially whenever we got to LAN. But this is business end of the year now. If you can find ways to grow into things, we can forgive and forget everything that happened in the first, 3 stages. If you come good at Challenger Champs and you somehow find your way to EWC. So I'm hoping that this is the moment that kickstarts a little bit of something. Obviously, there's a gap right now to that Omit roster, but that Omit roster is gross. So, yeah, you know, I'm hoping, though, that this is a little bit of something for these boys to celebrate this year.
Yeah, let's talk about Omit, man, because I think you're right there. You hit it on the head. Like, they are looking gross, right? Kind of the only team to make noise at the Pro-Am in Atlanta. And now we're coming in here into Elite Season 4, where obviously they kind of do, I think, what we expected them to do. They 3-0 their first 2 rounds. Easy work. Don't have to worry too much about it. Go up against P7, kind of their only opposition, it feels like, in the region right now. They lose a game 5 that's there. And this is where you might see some teams start to break. Not for this roster, though. They drop on down to that losers finals. 3-0 exceptional. Get right back into that grand finals. And they maybe had got that. We're going to call that first series the download series. They get all the information maybe they need. They hop into the grand finals. Quick little 4-0. Bryson Tunn feeling great about a fast night.
Yeah. Early shower for those two. But yeah, I think for Omit, I think there's a lot of things that obviously are impressive about this roster. One of the things obviously is that like DK and Ethan, they come in with this raw mechanical skill and hunger, and they are both fantastic talents. But you called it the download series, and what I love about that is, with DK and Ethan, like Denza's a veteran of the space. Aspect's been around for a couple of years now. Both of them are fully in tune with like, okay, what we just played, this is how we adapt to it the next time we stand up against them. For DK and Ethan, I would have put them in the category of being a bit young yet to really understand that, and maybe just kind of come out all guns a-blazing again and hope that it does the job better than it did first time around. Now, they hard counted everything that P7 had to offer. P7 looked like they were shell-shocked at points. So, yeah, great work from this Omit team. Huge plaudits, of course, to Omit and Rafi and co. for the faith put into that squad. I think Denza, honestly, was, and he'll probably say this himself, was sliding down the pecking order a bit. It's kind of like, where does he sit? Yep. I think he's found his place. It is being that figurehead and that leadership, that veterancy for some of these younger talents that have likely, hopefully, huge futures in front of them. If DK and Ethan don't have somebody in their DMs in the offseason, we're selling. I know this is the EMEA, but these boys have shown that they can do it on land too. I have no doubt they'll be challenger champs. And they should very much get some offers. But yeah, love everything about this roster right now. Bance, though, your interview, it fucking sucked.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, maybe we need to work on it, but oh my God. I mean, hopefully we can maybe fix that one in the future. Congratulations yet again to Omit, though, for winning the EMEA Elite Season 4. P7 kind of looked like how we expected them to look until that grand finals. Shell-shocked, I think, is a great way to kind of say that. But yet again, more teams we have to keep our eyes on ahead of the Paris Major Open and seeing who can make those runs there, who can maybe prove that they deserve to be one of these top challenger teams. Obviously, Elite Season 4 delivered so many moments, some highlights that were there, and some fun things to talk about, right? Especially when it comes to both North America and EMEA as we look towards the Paris Major Open. But we kind of talk about Elite Season 4 at a high-level view, Enigma. What are the big things that you're pulling out of here, kind of as we look for, we've talked about many, many times again, our season for challengers is coming to a close very quickly, and so now the pressure's on for so many of these teams.
It is, and this is the bit that separates the boys from the men. Like, we've talked so often about, like, okay, like, teams might be getting better at this stage of the season and so on and so forth. It rarely actually consistently plays out like that. A lot of players step up now at this point, challenger champs, and then, of course, potentially EWC for a lot of these boys. And that's when they start to crumble because the pressure's at its highest. Whereas other teams, maybe some of those underdogs that feel like they've got nothing to lose, it frees them up, if anything. So we always see kind of surprises thrown into the mix. I'm hoping that we do get a couple. And don't get me wrong, if we see the likes of Bush and Omit at EWC, I'm delighted, of course. But it's also one of those where it's like, I'd love to see maybe some new stories to write in the chapter of the year. It's been a long year. I don't know about that. It feels like one of the quickest one ever.
Yeah,
like it feels like 2 minutes ago since you and me were casting stage 1, to be honest. And obviously we started doing this podcast to make sure we were staying fully in tune with the scene, and everything's been pretty insane and intense. But for all those players that have written stories so far and have opened up a book and kind of put those chapters in, all of it's great and all, but this last one matters so much more than all the previous.
Yeah, it definitely has a little bit more weight to it. So let us know in the comments below, what was your favorite moment of Elite Season 4? Who is your favorite team to tune into? How excited are you that the Telluride Bush win yet another Elite Season 4? And also, what are you most excited for the rest of the season? A lot of good stuff. Make sure that you are tuned in, like, subscribe, all of that fun jazz, because we have plenty more content coming your way when it comes to challengers. But with that being said, that's all we got for you this week in Challenger.